It will seem strange to you to hear a reading about the crucifixion in November, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, but today is a holiday known as Reign of Christ Sunday or Christ the King Sunday, and the gospel lesson assigned for today is about just that, the reign of Christ. And so listen to what the Spirit might speak into your life in this surprising reading from Luke chapter 23 and verses 33 through 43. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing, and the people stood by watching. But the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him, saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since we are under the same sentence of condemnation? And indeed, we have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." May God bless to our understanding this reading from God's holy word, and to God's name be glory and praise. Amen. Serious question. How many people on this globe understand you? How many people actually understand you? I'm not asking how many people know you. That's a different question. There are probably enough people in the world who could predict your actions pretty accurately in a given set of circumstances. There are folks out there who could tell me what you would do if you won the lottery, for example. What you would do if you were given a week to live. There are probably people who could tell us that. But how many of those same people can tell you why you would do what you would do if you won the lottery or if you had a week to live? How many of them could explain to me your motivations, the things that make you tick, why you do stuff? I bet it's fewer than 5. Don't you think? 5 or fewer, 5 at the top limit. Here's a harder question. How many people in this world do you truly understand? How many people? If you're married, do you honestly understand your spouse? Sometimes we don't, do we? Your children? Your closest friends? Do you understand your parents? It's hard to understand them because their stuff is all mixed up with our stuff. We all want to be understood to some degree, or at least we don't want to be misunderstood, even if the idea of being fully understood is kind of intimidating. The famous prayer of St. Francis says, "O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be understood as to understand." Most people probably aren't too very hard to understand. Most people probably just want what they think is best for themselves and for the people they love. In an age of bitter divisions, we need to get better at just trying to understand each other. Now, I really hesitated as to whether I should tell you this next story. It's another personal story. It's a confession of sin. And it was indeed a sin. I lied. I told a bold-faced lie that I quickly regretted, immediately regretted. And it wasn't all that long ago. It was 3 years ago. Have you ever just been on a plane and you just don't want to talk to the person beside you? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you want to talk to your seatmate, but there are times when you're just not in the space where you want to tell your life story to a stranger or listen to theirs. It was one of those days for me. I just didn't care to get into all the stuff that you have to discuss with your seatmate in an airplane on a flight from Cameroon to Paris. No, it was Brussels. I was coming home from a trip to Cameroon. I was feeling wistful, as I usually do when I'm coming home from Cameroon, and I just wasn't ready to talk. I wanted to ruminate on the things I had experienced there. I'd gone there for an ordination. I wanted to think about the relationships I was leaving behind. You know, spending a significant piece of your life in a different country, it kind of leaves you with a divided heart for the rest of your life. I was just sad. I didn't want to talk. Now, there are measures you can take when you don't want to talk on an airplane to signal your desire to keep to yourself. You can bury your nose in a book. That usually works. You can maintain a distant facial expression. It's amazing what you can say with just your face. You can look out the window if you're lucky enough to have a window seat, which I did not. I tried a few of these. But the guy sitting next to me was having none of it. He was not picking up on my cues. It didn't help that I was clearly one of only a handful of foreigners on the plane. That was my least favorite thing about Africa. I could never just kind of blend in. The guy beside me was understandably curious. Where are you from? What are you doing here? What's your profession? Now, when you're a pastor, I've told you before, especially in a deeply religious place like Africa, it can just get weird really quickly when you say, "Oh, I'm a pastor." Here in the US, it usually ends the conversation. "I'm a pastor." "Oh." And then you can see people tracing their memory to see if they cursed in your presence. Then there's complete silence. But there, it's often a recipe for long, complicated conversations about traditional beliefs in witchcraft and sorcery and colonialism and whatever private struggles that person might be facing. I've even had strangers there ask me to pray with them, which is perfectly appropriate to ask of a pastor. But I wasn't in the place where I could do that. This time I just needed silence. And so I thought, you know what? A little white lie isn't going to hurt. I'm just going to say that I'm something else. I'm going to create a story, not even a story, I'm going to tell a little lie to maybe create silence for myself. I said that I was a copy editor. Okay, it's a little bit true because I do edit the bulletin, not the announcements. Not the announcements, just the worship pages. I told him I was a copy editor. I check spelling and punctuation for a living. I'll never see this guy again. It doesn't matter. I just want to rest. If anything is going to end a conversation, it's telling a person that I live for grammar, which I might have done if I hadn't been so deeply spiritual. "I'm a copy editor," I said. He was fascinated. "Really? A copy editor? I'm a journalist. We don't really use copy editors anymore. We have software to do all that." "What software do you use?" "What brings a copy editor to Cameroon?" You're clearly not a native French speaker. What are you editing French over here?" And the lie briefly begot a few more lies, as they always do, I promise. They always do. To the point that I actually gave up and confessed the truth. Then he stopped talking. Not because I was a pastor, but because I was a weirdo who would lie about being a copy editor. And at this point, he wasn't sure he could believe anything I said. The moral of that confession is not only that little white lies too can get you into trouble, but mostly that I hate being misunderstood, and most of us do hate being misunderstood. I thought that if I told him who I really was, it would create misunderstanding. He'd think I was some kind of fanatic or that I thought Africa needed me, the white savior, to come and tell them spiritual truths. But in an attempt to avoid being misunderstood, I created deeper misunderstanding, and I ended up looking like a fool. I should have said this. I'm a pastor. I came here for an ordination. I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude, but I'm really tired. Can I just rest for now? And it's a long flight. Maybe we can talk later. Might be a little off-putting, but it would have been honest, and it would have avoided a messy situation. And so here's another curious question for you. Can you think of any people in the Gospels who understood Jesus? Who understood him? I can think of just a handful, and they're all minor characters. It seems like most of Jesus' friends and followers and even his enemies only see in him the things that they want to see. And it must have been one of the great lonelinesses of his life to be so profoundly misunderstood by pretty much everyone. In his times, his own disciples clearly believed that he was going to be a warrior king, that he was going to be a politician, he was the Messiah, he was going to restore Israel to its former glory. Even when his closest friend Peter makes his declaration of who Jesus is, he doesn't get it entirely right, at least not in Mark. The religious authorities, they didn't know what to make of him. What's up with this guy? They felt threatened. They thought he was a strange troublemaker. They entertained the notion that he was possessed by a demon. The political powers, I pity those people. They didn't know what to do with him either, this weird religious wingnut, stirring up dissent. I'm sure those poor Romans hated getting assigned to Palestine where people were so religious. But let's have a little grace for all the people who don't get Jesus, because how well are we doing at understanding Jesus? All we have is 4 short books about his life, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and each of them was written with a different audience and a different agenda. And as I ponder those 4 books, I can only think of 3 people, and maybe you can think of others. I can think of 3 people who I think got Jesus. And as I said, they're all minor characters. One is the unnamed woman who lavished expensive perfume on him, tearfully preparing his body for burial while he was still alive in Mark 14. He kept telling everybody, I'm going to go die. You know that. I'm going to die soon. Nobody believed him because they wanted him to be a Messiah. One woman understood what he was saying and believed it and anointed him, as they did in those times, with perfume. And then there was the Roman centurion at the crucifixion who got right the thing that Peter didn't quite get right, at least in Mark. He says, surely this was the Son of God. And then there was the thief on the cross that we just read about, who says, as they are both dying, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he knew that that kingdom was not Israel. It wasn't a glorified Palestine. It was something else. It was something spiritual. It was not a political thing. Maybe you can think of others, but the point is that Jesus was and is sorely misunderstood. We tend to see in him what we want to see, what we need to see, maybe ourselves. And in case you're hoping I will tell you who Jesus truly is, I'll give you another confession. I do it too. We all do it. I'm no exception. I see in Jesus the thing that I need Jesus to be most times, just like Peter did and Martha did and you did, and you probably do. Today is a medieval holiday known as Christ the King, or Reign of Christ Sunday, the last Sunday of the church year, which glories in the power and the majesty of Christ over all things. A new church year starts next Sunday for the first Sunday in Advent. At my last church where I got ordained, they had this beautiful round stained glass window above the chancel that depicted the enthroned Christ with a big crown on his head and his foot on a globe. Beautiful but horrible in a way. Because as we discussed, some of us last week, Jesus didn't say worship me, he said follow me. But it's a whole lot easier to worship him than it is to follow him. Nowadays, we soften Christ the King by rebranding it as Reign of Christ Sunday, sidestepping issues of gender and kingship. Call it whichever you will, I'm not a great fan of any holiday that depicts Jesus as a king. I mean, as harmless as King Charles probably is royalty ever a good thing? What does it say about humankind? That some of us are just naturally born better than others with the right to rule them? Our Scotch-Irish ancestors stole all this land from the Seneca and Shawnee because they were driven by their motto, no bishop and no king. The very point of Christ is that God walks among us as one of us, not that God looks over us and judges us. Happily, though, Christ the King, or Reign of Christ Sunday, always bumps up against a much better holiday called Thanksgiving. And gratitude is always good. And that's where we usually lay our emphasis on the Sunday before Advent. But see how badly we still mistake Jesus. See how badly the church still mistakes Jesus. In the Middle Ages, when the church was all about power, they had a holiday all about Jesus' earthly power. It's a marvel that Christendom has lasted this long, isn't it? As wrong as we've sometimes gotten Jesus. And yet, great truths are always being misunderstood. And great visionaries are always handing their movements over to people of lesser passions and lesser vision, people who never quite got it right, people who can't live into its fullness. The trouble with a lot of great truths is that they're just too simple to accept. They're just too simple. It couldn't possibly be this easy. Jesus' message is so simple, and yet it's really, really hard to put into practice. Center yourself in the peace and the joy that is God. See God in yourself, see God in others. Treat everything and everyone as the divine gift that they are. That's it? Is that all? We walk away baffled. There has to be more to it. It has to be, harder, but not quite that hard. It can't be that simple. Love God, love others, love yourselves, that's it. No, it can't be that easy, and it must not be that hard. Let's have crusades. Let's have cathedrals and inquisitions and fights over the role of women and gay people. Let's have buildings and budgets and, as some frustrated pastors say, BS. I would not say that, honestly. Some of us just want to wear our funny clothes and go through comforting rituals. Others want to seize power and make America a Christian nation. Was Jesus about any of these things? I do love church, though, obviously. At its best, church is a source of grace and charity, and beauty and wisdom and guidance. A place for sacred stories and sacred song, and community and self-discovery and mission. Church such as we have it probably was not Jesus' vision, but it is our solace and our home. And I think that's okay, as long as we don't love it more than the mission that Jesus gives us, which is to follow him, to love God and neighbor and ourselves. It's funny how it's always the outsiders who get Jesus. The thief on the cross, the marginalized woman with her jar of perfume, the Roman soldier. I think there are many in our times who leave religion behind because they get Jesus pretty well, and they see precious little of him in the churches. On the whole, Jesus is greatly misunderstood. Is he just our ticket to heaven, whose gruesome death somehow placates an angry God? Is he the doe-eyed white man pointing to his own bleeding heart? Is he the king of power and glory? Is he the friend who walks with me and talks with me, tells me I'm his own? A sage, a teacher of wisdom, a prophet, a failed Messiah who thought he was going to bring in the end of the world? There's only one way to understand Jesus, and it is so hard that few have really tried it. You got to follow him, and that's hard. It's easier to worship him than to follow him. It's easier to pray to him and idolize him than to do the things he tells us to do. I hate to be misunderstood. I think most of us do. It hurts when even the people who know you fail to really understand you. It even hurts when strangers misunderstand us. I treasure a few very old grudges over instances when I have been misunderstood. Years ago, once a parishioner who since left the church and over this issue said to me that my Easter sermon said this: you just have to believe. You just got to believe. I have never in my career preached a sermon telling you you have to make yourself believe. Quite the contrary. I've often said you can't make yourself believe anything. She heard it very differently. She heard it as you just have to make yourself believe, and I couldn't talk her out of it. Ooh, that was frustrating. Another time I had oral surgery in my 30s to get fitted for braces. And the surgeon was talking as he was extracting my teeth to his assistant, telling his assistant about me. And he told her that my second daughter was just born and I had named her Gretel. Not Greta, Gretel. And I lay in the chair like this. I couldn't contradict him. I couldn't correct him. And I was embarrassed. Who would name their child Gretel? And every time someone finds out I'm a pastor, I'm afraid they're going to think that I'm a hate-filled bigot. I'm afraid they're going to think I'm someone who believes he has all the answers and feels morally superior. We hate being misunderstood. And so, on this Reign of Christ Sunday, I think there are two things that we can take home. First, we have gotten very bad at trying to understand each other in these times, because we get our news from sound bites, and we get our beliefs from our news. We get our ethical guidance from our news source. We've gotten very bad at understanding each other. Let us try to understand each other and ourselves. The great impasse in our society today comes from the fact that we no longer share our lives with people unlike us. We live in bubbles and echo chambers. Healing comes from understanding the other. And to do that, we have to listen. We have to observe. We have to keep silent. We have to show respect. Let's listen to and understand ourselves too. Because do we really listen to ourselves? This is the beauty of therapy and prayer. You actually have to listen to the stuff you're thinking. Therapy and prayer do that, don't they? Let's endeavor to understand ourselves and others. And secondly, let's try our best to understand Jesus. And there's only one way to do it, and it's hard. We have to follow him. Let's follow him. Amen.